Welcome to Lead Today with me, Kalyna. Let's talk leadership. Hello and welcome to this show and series where we're really looking at what's in my book. That's what is on my mind and what I want to share with you so that you can benefit by listening and decide if this is a book that you'd like to purchase. And I hope it is, because I've poured my heart and soul into it. And I think that no matter what stage of your career or life you're in, whatever season, whatever it is that you're challenged by in this time of your life, I think that there's something in this book for you. Today, I would like to invite you to consider donating a cup of coffee to support this show. It's another way that you can get involved and support me and my work if you're finding value through these episodes. And well, that's about it in terms of news for today. I'd love to dive right in. Today is about chapter 3, awareness. I think this is really important because it's for people like me who many times struggle with saying no, understanding what it is that my conscience is telling me. What is my conscience? What is right? What is wrong for me at this time? Am I people pleasing? If you're questioning your inner guidance system and how you're making choices or what it is that you want, this chapter is for you completely, because I have been there. I am there. I'm sure I will be there in a multitude of arenas in my life. As I've shared in previous episodes, if you're new to this series, this is not just about work. This is about cultivating a meaningful impact on the world, leaving something that you are proud of behind in the form of relationships or things you've created, built. This is about having a lasting legacy through the contribution that you make in the world. If you're a parent, that means your kids. If you are an artist, that means your works, your podcasts, your books, the clients that you've helped, the contracts that you've worked on, no matter what it is that you're creating in this world. And we will get to that on the chapter about creativity, which is in part 2. So stay tuned for that side of things. But just to emphasize, this book is for anybody wanting to contribute in the world and also wanting to understand themselves better. So this is for you. And this episode in particular is for you if you are feeling a bit like you want to check in with that inner guidance, the messages that your body sends to you, the thoughts you keep having, and really tuning into what I call the Holy Spirit or God. You don't have to subscribe to any spiritual beliefs or a religion to benefit from this chapter or any part of this book, but through my life experiences and my understanding of the world, that is how I have been able to talk about the experiences and the concepts that I have had, that I find important, and relay it in a way that others understand. We all understand the notion of God. We all understand the notion of the Holy Spirit. If you don't, let's briefly touch upon what I mean by this. And I am no expert. I'm not a religious expert or a theological expert. I'm not trying to convert anybody with this book or this episode. What my intent is to explain what these words mean to me. And I do so even in more detail in the book. But for right now, our purpose is God is a higher power, an omniscient source, something that is beyond us as humans, that we can't control, that guides and directs all things. Bigger power, universe type of energy that I think a lot of us, we shy away from the word God, but that's the word I use for that force. You can call it whatever you like, but that's what I mean when I say God. And Holy Spirit is the way that God comes into us and informs us, sort of like your intuition, maybe your conscience, maybe you would see it as fate when things happen a certain way, or destiny. Those kinds of words get all thrown around. To me, the Holy Spirit is how God sort of resides in us and gives us insights and messages. And when we talk about hearing the call, I think that there's a really, I didn't mean for this episode to go this way, but here we are. I think there's this secularization of society, but we're coming up with different words for what already exists in the language of religious texts, not just the Bible. Most monotheistic religions talk about God, and other religions talk about many gods, but the word God is sort of the standard word. So rather than reinventing the wheel, I want to just be very clear so that whatever your thought process or belief system is, we're just all on the same page about words, because words can really hold different meanings for people, right? The connotation and your experience with a word can really cloud your ability to even receive my message, right? You might have heard God, you might have heard like religion, and you just kind of shut down.
This episode would not be possible without Anchor. It's free and the easiest way to make a podcast. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
That is something that you'll have the opportunity to consider in this book, because I believe that your spiritual beliefs and your spirituality is a core part of your being. And so if you're avoiding it, or if you have a negative relationship with it, or you feel fearful about it, or there's something that you don't want to look at, I really think that we need to address the elephant under the carpet for whatever that is. Maybe it's not spirituality, maybe it's your relationships, something about your body, something about the way you think. But my goal, because the role I've taken on in this book is to really be your coach in your hands, right? Like with this book, you can kind of experience a little bit of what it would be like to go through coaching with me personally and learn about me and my approach and the questions I ask myself and my clients regularly and how I approach challenges. So that's my hope with this. And for me, how I approach challenges is body, mind, spirit. And that's not new, but that is how I approach it. And I think some people have cut out the spirit part of the equation. And I think that we are, as humans, innately drawn to a force that's bigger than ourselves, a governing sort of, not a governing body like government, but a governing force, a governing energy, something that we plug into that makes us all interconnected, right? We feel that for sure when it comes to the way information spreads online. That kind of gives us, like, the internet sort of makes us feel almost like that interconnection between all things. And I think that's what being, I mean, maybe enlightened to some degree would be, to be able to understand the oneness, the way that we're all interconnected. And so I went down a bit of the road there, but I do want to clarify, because my fear, even in writing the book and then having people edit it, was seeing that, oh, wow, you said God, maybe we could change that to higher power. Maybe we can, move away from that. And I want to be really frank with you. I don't want to move away from that. I want to say God, and I want to say, you can call it higher power, and the word itself is not as important as us being clear about what I mean by it, right? And I'm not saying it to upset anyone. I'm saying it to be exceptionally clear so that there's no question about what it is that I'm talking about. So I hope that helps, because it's not a convincing type of angle. It's a clarifying, let's be on the same page angle. So I hope that helps, because if you do read the book, I definitely mention God, and I know what that can bring up. I mean, if you talk to me 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't have had the conviction or the grasp on what those words mean to me to say this to you. I really wouldn't have. And it's been through the experiences that I've had over the past 4 years, which you'll hear about in the book, that really brought me to this point of, without a shadow of a doubt, knowing that there's something larger than me at work, because there's no way I could be here today if there wasn't. So I'm utterly convinced. And whether or not you're utterly convinced about the same thing is actually irrelevant to you being able to gain a lot from this book. But I want to be transparent with you that that is something that comes up. And I think that if it's really causing some red flags for you or upset for you, I think it's an opportunity for you to really look into why for yourself, right? Even if you don't read the book, if this episode, if this me talking about this is like, I want to shut this off, or what is she saying, or I completely disagree, great. I think you should look at that, not for me, but for yourself, because anything that upsets us is an opportunity. And I think that that's sort of what we get into with the chapter on awareness, actually, is being aware of what it is that stirs up strong emotion in you, what it is in your body that's being stirred up and it's trying to tell you, whether that's aches and pains or messages about stiffness or messages about a gut feeling. We talk about gut feelings and even some research behind the power of really listening and tuning in, that it's actually a great source of information for us because of how many things are being considered in the gut brain connection. So I think, regardless of what your thoughts on God are, that you can gain a lot from this chapter because it's really asking you to be aware about what it is that you think. And so God, your body, your mind are all opportunities for you to become more aware about you, about what conscience means to you, what God means to you, what could it possibly mean to connect to something greater than you, to worship something greater than yourself. And that's a tough one, right? I definitely know for me, it's very easy to be self-involved and only think about my needs. I mean, I need to take care of myself to survive, and I'm self-interested as a human. We all are. And if we're not admitting that to ourselves, I think there's another discussion to be had, because we are all self-interested. And so that's something to not necessarily, again, avoid or shy away from, but to be aware of, that, hey, there's a tendency, and I can go toward ego, and I can go toward contribution and meaning. I can go toward more. I can go toward surrender. I can go toward trust. I can go toward enlightenment, or I can go toward ego, and I can go toward being self-serving and superficial, and that feels cheap to some degree, because even if you get that pat on the back from an egotistical standpoint, it's not going to fulfill the deeper desire for meaning. So just being aware. I think this chapter, this episode, if something brings up a strong feeling for you, be aware of that. Ask yourself a couple of questions. We actually in the book have a chapter, or a section rather, in every chapter called Ask Yourself. So that's what I think you should do. If you want my 2 cents, is ask yourself the things that repeatedly are causing you aggravation, frustration, upset, things you shy away from, the elephants under your carpet. What are they? How can you be more aware of them as they come up? And some of those things might be around your body. How do your clothes feel? How do the different parts of your body feel? How do you feel in your own skin? What are you eating? What are you consuming from a physical standpoint? What are you consuming from a mental standpoint? Media. Who are you around? Their energy. And your spirit. Are you doubting? Are you feeling a lack of faith in yourself, in the world? That calls for a rejuvenation of the spirit, your spirit, the spirit within you, right? If you're feeling down, if you're isolating yourself, if you're doubting, if you're kind of in a downward spiral, if you feel pulled in many directions or swayed, or feeling like, you're kind of being tossed around by life a little bit, that's a really good season to tune into the spirit side of things, I would say. And in all honesty, in writing this book, I was tossed around by life. I definitely went through some valleys. I was extremely challenged personally, emotionally, physically, mentally. One example of that I mentioned in previous episodes is my car accident in 2019. Very, very intense moment from, sustaining a traumatic brain injury, going on an 8 month, if not longer, road to recovery. Years of post concussion syndrome. Interesting. I'm talking about this. I'm drawing some awareness to that subject, and I think that's what we do in communication with others, right? And that's why being so thoughtful about our word and how we share things and being effective at communication is so important, because I want to bring your attention to some things. So as we talk, as I share, I'm hoping to bring some new awareness up in you, bring your attention to things, perhaps provoke a new way of thinking, some questions, maybe it evokes some emotion, and emotions are pointing you in the direction of what it is that's important. Emotions are a messenger for sure, right? I think when we get swayed by our emotions, that's when it's a bit troublesome, very easy to do. Emotions aren't truth. Emotions are messengers, and that's a distinction I really work to make in the book. And I would say that it's something to consider. I didn't mean to come to this episode necessarily harping on the spirit side, but it is a type of awareness that I talk about. And I think that whenever there have been times in my life when I've avoided that connection to something greater than me and avoided my connection to community, others around me as well, it's a really big sign that I'm not plugged into the right mindset and the right area of focus, which we'll talk about at the end of this part 1 series. Let's say there are 3 parts of the book. If you haven't listened to the earlier episodes, we've got choice, fulfillment, and impact. And the last chapter of part 1 is focus. Sorry, no, it's chapter 7. My apologies. Chapter 7 is focus. Chapter 8 is persistence. So we'll get to it in chapter 7, which is in a few episodes. Point being, if you're feeling like you're sort of floating on a raft in the middle of the ocean in your life, which I could say I've been there this year, I've been there. I think that cultivating a sense of awareness as to what's coming up for you, what the messages are, what they're trying to say to you, whether it's your body and your mind, recurring thoughts, it could be negative self-talk as well, is a really big messenger as to something that needs your attention. I think we often avoid the discomfort. And one of the biggest things I've learned through the mentors that I discuss in this chapter of the book is really leaning in to all of the sensations of our bodies, and then similarly of our minds. It's crucially important, because the more we avoid those sensations, trying to protect ourselves from them, the bigger they get, the louder they get, and inevitably they will show themselves or make themselves known. So the more prompt we are about attending to the messages that we get, the signals that we get from our body and mind, it's my understanding and what I've seen in the world, the quicker we are to attend to those things, the less likely they are to really spiral into bigger, more significant things. And so if we're avoiding the warning signs, if you're avoiding some sort of warning signs that a light is blinking on your dashboard, but you've been kind of trying to ignore it, this is your reminder, this is your chance, this is your moment to consider really writing it down and addressing it. And if you feel like you don't know what to do, or okay, I know what these things are, but they're scary to address, I highly recommend you take some time alone to really think them through, because more often than not, and I mean, of course, you can work with me, you can work with a coach to work through where you are, where you want to be, and that step-by-step process. But more often than not, people come to me wanting an answer. And if you're aware, if you cultivate the skills from this chapter and this episode, I think that you'll realize that really the answers will be shown to you and given to you through the messages that you get from the Holy Spirit, from as I've said, you can make that mean your intuition or your conscience. You'll hear the right answer. You'll get that right answer for yourself. And we talk a bit more about this kind of stillness concept in the final chapter, chapter 22, on patience. So be patient and know that we will get there at the end as well if you want more about that stillness piece. But in this chapter, we do have a couple meditations and we look at the value of that, the value of how you present yourself in the world, because your physical body is how you interact with the world. And so while that might seem superficial, it is. And we dive into why that's important. It's important not because you need to be perfect or because everybody needs to think you superficially look good, but because the way you portray yourself in the world is how people will respond and receive you. So, how do you want to be received? Making sure you portray yourself in a fashion that allows you to be received the way you want to be, right? And there are certain things that point people toward who you are, what you stand for, how you care for yourself. So that is part of this awareness equation. So remember to delve into some questions around what is your mind, body, and spirit telling you. Ask yourself what you're avoiding. Ask yourself, what is it? What are the messages that keep kind of coming to you, that either reoccurring thoughts, things you keep seeing, a part of your body that keeps kind of hurting and talking to you because there's pain in your back, or there's pain here, you're stiff somewhere else. Like, what is that trying to say to you? Really tune in to the messages that you're getting and be aware for this week and this particular chapter, because that's what's going to support you to get out of the feeling of being adrift. And one final bonus thing, I think, which might not be about awareness, but I was reading about recently, and I feel that I'd like to share with you, is when you do feel sort of, let's say, ungrounded and, let's say, flighty, a bit kind of up in the clouds about things. I think something that really helps me is this concept of do what your ancestors would have done. So anything that, let's say, your great great grandmother would have had access to. So not an iPhone, not a computer, not even a car, most probably, or a plane. It would be nature. It would be potentially writing, maybe not even writing, but, cooking. So simple things that are very grounding are things that would have been around with your ancestor generations ago. Even, I think of even my grandmother. She lived on a farm for most of her young life and even adult life until she moved to Canada. So, even my grandmother's generation is leaps and bounds behind the technological advancement that we've seen in our lifetime here. I'd offer that up as something to perhaps be the preamble to getting in touch with yourself. Find a way to connect to something very primal, very basic, very ancestrally consistent. Like, yeah, and I said journaling, but maybe that's not even it. Maybe that's even going one step too far. Cooking something very slowly, something that takes your full attention and is viscerally engaging to your body and your whole kind of spirit. I think that's, yeah, I think that's right. So I hope that you find some more awareness from this episode. And if you're interested in more on this or any of the other chapters of the book, please feel free to check out the rest of the series, of course, because I'm doing an episode on every single chapter of the book, similar to this format. I'm not reading the book in this medium, but I am discussing all the different chapters. And if you do want to hear the book read, in December, we'll be launching first the physical book and the ebook, but to come in the months following that will definitely be an audiobook. So there will be multiple ways that you can engage with the text if that's something you want to do. And please do share this episode or any of the others with a friend you think might benefit. A big part of the book is, as I've said before, working with others to move forward toward building a meaningful life. So do share this if you find it to be causing you to question, giving you a new way of thinking, or you find it supportive. I'm sure someone else in your world would benefit too. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen today. And I'll see you in the next episode on chapter 4, which is perspective. We'll look at limiting beliefs and really how important your perspective is to crafting a legacy that you're proud of. Talk soon.